Hi there, welcome to Radio Out There, and Barry Eaton here with you once again. This week, Duncan Rhodes. Yes, it's Nexus time once again, and our old friend Duncan Rhodes, editor and publisher of Nexus magazine, now read and enjoyed in many countries all around the world. This week, we have a few controversial subjects to talk to you about, and a couple that will really cause you to sit back and have a lot of thinking time. So without further ado, here's the man himself, Duncan Rhodes. Duncan, good to talk to you again.
Hi, Barry.
How's it going?
Pretty good. Very good, actually.
I know things are happening in your neck of the woods a lot with magazines and expansion overseas and all sorts of wonderful things.
Absolutely. We relaunched the magazine with a new look earlier this year, and it looks like it's proving successful.
Oh, that's great.
Both in Australia and overseas. The other thing I wanted to mention here at the front, without sounding like a commercial, we've opened up our Nexus shop up here in Mullaney.
I know, I was there last week.
Yeah, anyone in the Sunshine Coast or Queensland, come up to Mullaney and see us all, see any back issues. But we've decided to put a couple of extra items in the shop, and one of them is the Blue Shield technology, which has been out there and about for at least a couple of years in the marketplace. And during that time, we've listened carefully to feedback from people we know who are electrosensitive or whatever. Because there's some people out there who are so electrosensitive that they, you know, if they find something that works, it's a big deal. And I'm happy to say that we're selling Blue Shield, and Blue Shield is still the only device and product and technology out there that Nexus has ever come across, which we believe actually works in alleviating all the symptoms and effects of electropollution.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that.
One of the things, as we've been getting more into, you know, testing and getting feedback from people, one of the things we're learning, and this might be a surprise to some listeners, is how much dirty electricity and EMF and EMR are coming off solar panels on people's roofs.
Oh, really? I haven't heard that one.
Off the charts. And it's only when people get a tri-field meter or go up there and realise, my God, this is phenomenal. Now, not everybody is always necessarily living under the solar panels. A lot of people up around here put them on sheds and barns, places like that. But it's definitely having a health impact on people. And
what sort of a health impact?
Well, the same general effects as electrostress. It's chronic fatigue, immune system, not necessarily the classic headaches that you would traditionally associate just with a mobile phone being used.
Right.
But systemic, loss of energy, blood issues, blood cancers. Not happy campers. But the Blue Shield products and their technology is definitely. Well, we know that it's working not only through the live blood test, but it's working on neighbours who don't even know that the device is installed, because some of these devices, like the high-end one, the Cube, that's meant to service blocks of flats, small farms, and big houses with smart meters and solar panels. So often if you're in the city or the suburbs and you buy one of these Blue Shield Cubes, it's putting out a spherical field that's effective for 90 metres every direction. So a lot of the time you're bathing your neighbours for free, and they don't know about it. Well, sometimes these neighbours and people upstairs or downstairs are reporting amazing health improvements or the cessation of symptoms like migraines not happening again for no particular reason. The interesting one more recently for us was a chap just north of us who got a Cube for his small farm and homestead, and because he's worried about the solar panels and EMF around him, he's got a couple of towers not far away, but he's nervous about them. But he said for the last few months, he reported an interesting side effect of the Blue Shield Cube that he purchased. Last few months, he said that the bees, this guy's right into his bees, he said the bees have been acting very unusually. Their behaviour patterns have totally changed. They're obviously periodically disoriented and confused. He said he even finds bees trying to fly into his house at night time. And that had perplexed him for quite a while. But anyway, he got the Blue Shield and he switched it on. And he said literally from the moment he switched it on, the bees' behaviour all went back to normal. And so he was quite impressed by that, because that's not why he bought it, but it's the fact that the bees responded to it was a good sign for him.
Well, not only that, Duncan, but it's a good sign for everybody. I mean, we've had so much disruption of the bee colonies around the world in recent times.
Well, this is a good segue into some of one of the articles we've got in this issue, if you want to go into it. That's the 5G network.
You read my mind, exactly what I was going to say. It's straight into it, because the bees have been affected with 5G.
Well, we don't know exactly. I mean, there's speculation about what's affecting the bees, and the electromagnetic spectrum is definitely one aspect of it. A lot of the bees' life and activity is governed actually by electricity. Because they fly around, they actually generate a negative charge. And when they land on a plant, the pollen literally flies across from the plant to the bee by electrostatics. It's not the bee sort of bumbling around and always necessarily gathering on it. That's with a variety of insects. So the whole electromagnetic spectrum is, of course, very important to bees.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is with this new evolution of technology rolling out, I mean, people have heard 3G, 4G. 5G is going to be a significant game changer, even though it seems as if it's just one more progression in the Gs. 5G is actually a game changer in that this is the technology support structure which allows all devices, things, toys, toasters, fridges to talk to each other, to talk to the net. Your toaster will be talking to your smart meter with no wires connecting it, and I mean, all this sort of this is what allows for that. So it's a massive human experiment. It's all within the microwave spectrum again, which is an area, that's not really well researched. And again, when the experts go to do safety tests and measurements, they're looking for what thermal heat is being emitted from devices that it's going to affect, biological organisms in the vicinity. And that's now completely out of date in terms of looking for effects in the head. Most children and teenagers using a mobile phone, you very rarely see it up near their head. They're holding it around chest height, and they're texting and et cetera, or they're holding it on their lap. So these days, scientists should be testing for cell phone damage to the organs in the chest area of teenage and 20-something boys and girls, because that's where the phone's being held most of the time.
That's right. Well, we know a friend of ours, Philip, a couple of years ago, passed through that.
Philip Coppens.
Coppens, yeah.
2 active mobile phones, one in each breast pocket with a gold, silver medallion in the middle. That's a recipe for disaster, and it killed him very quickly.
It was for Phil, yeah. Yeah, that was very, very sad.
Yeah, and but there is a rise. There is an unexplained rise in lung cancer and heart disease in teenage up to late 20-year-old girls, and they got no idea what's causing it. I would suggest that they need to analyse the fields coming off the mobile phones are all holding in that proximate area, as opposed to the old days when people had the mobile phone against the ear, and we were afraid of brain cancer.
Sounds
so
logical.
5G,
can you tell us, because in the article, which is in the current edition of Nexus, there's a wonderful definition of 5G. As you said, we've had 3G, 4G. Everybody just takes it as, that's just another initial. But there's a really good definition of this whole thing. So would you mind going into that a bit?
Well, you mean the red box on page 26?
Something like that, yeah. What is 5G?
Well, look, let's just read it out. The 5G rollout was announced in June 2016 by Tom Wheeler, Chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, this is in America, in a speech stating that unprecedented numbers of new microwave radiation frequencies will be unleashed on the public. These frequencies within the microwave spectrum include never-before-released millimetre wave frequencies. They will produce synergistic adverse biological effects in combination with existing emission levels. 2 months before this announcement, the US National Toxicology Program study, the most comprehensive study of rats ever performed, deemed that microwave radiation causes DNA breaks and cancers of the brain and heart. So the FCC ignored these results, and considering the FCC is the only regulatory agency monitoring, the safety standards of this, it's really failing at its job. So millimetre waves, they're the fastest, shortest, highest intensity wavelengths within the microwave spectrum. Specialised frequencies used in medicine to treat certain cancers. They're used in airport body scanners, where high incidences of cancer are found in Transport Security Administration workers who operate them. All wireless microwave radiation causes biological harm, but millimetre waves pose unique biological harm because they're short, varying in millimetre thickness. They affect insects, plant foliage, human skin, and especially eyes are very vulnerable to them. They have not been safely tested by the FCC or any agency that supports the rollout.
Yeah.
How will this 5G infrastructure be achieved? The plan is to build dense placements of small cell distributed antenna systems on every light and every electrical pole in every neighbourhood and every public place of way. In other words, this is a real in-your-face...
Literally.
There'll be little receivers and transmitters everywhere you go, and they're all talking to each other, talking to your phone. It will be an advertising nightmare or dream come true, depending on which side of the fence you're sitting on. It's just terrific. No place will be safe. Along with surveillance cameras in every pole, they're saying this will facilitate the total surveillance of all people, basically within the catchment area of them. So all devices, this is right at the bottom of it all, it says all the devices will be connected to become part of the proposed Internet of Things. So driverless cars will be using this, home appliances, smart meters, RFID chips, which are on a lot of products that you buy in supermarkets and in department stores. Pretty much everybody will be going into RFID chips because they'll be using the same infrastructure to talk to each other and to you.
Now,
So
surely if
for
this information's if this information's out there, Duncan, people must know about it. I know we're not going to get really positive words from communication companies because they're going to make so much money out of it all, but what about everybody else, the leaders, so-called leaders in the world and everything like that? Are they just sort of shutting their eyes to all of this because corporate vested interests?
Well, it's very much like those TV shows, Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister. If they do become aware of it through official channels, then they can be held accountable, but their best bet is not to say to the person passing them the report, is this a wise move that I actually read this report?
Oh, yeah.
So, to be able to claim not knowing. But the leaders of the world give over this responsibility to the regulatory agencies. Technically, they're supposed to oversee who runs the agencies and, ensure they do a good job. But the leaders of the free world rely on reports and commissions and inquiries to advise them that so-and-so persons or so-and-so committee and so-and-so agency is suspected of not performing up to standard and giving out false and misleading information, and that takes years. Yeah. I mean, every 2 years we've got a new G rolling out, so it's they're not keeping up with the technology, and once again, this will exterminate massive parts of the general population, like other technology breakthroughs have done. It will never really be accounted for, or nobody will ever really go back and look at the number of people who died when AM radio came out and wiped out a small subset of the population. It's the same thing going on here. Those of us who survive and have children who go on to survive will be, I guess, technically immune to it all, and maybe that's what they want. But in the meantime, we are in a petri dish of experimentation with all this.
Yeah. I love the way this article finishes up, actually. If I can quote, once fully implemented, this technology will turn Earth into a wireless planetary cage. Its proponents intend to monitor and control everything while compromising our health and the biosphere around us. I'm sorry if this sounds Orwellian, but that's because it is. And I think that summarizes everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just finish on this story one piece of information. In America, there's a growing number of people who are so electrosensitive they can't even stand in a vague proximity of someone, even with a mobile phone in their handbag.
Really?
So these people are seeking out physical locations in the United States where they can feel no effects from EMF or EMR, which is electromagnetic radiation of any kind. And there's only a few places, unless you want to go way out in the wilderness and off-grid, which a lot of these people can't really sustain themselves in doing, there's only 1 or 2 places in America where you can safely live and you're not exposed to any Wi-Fi radiation, Bluetooth, or any of that. And they are, one of those places has a huge telescope which is highly sensitive, so sensitive that the FCC has deemed that for a radius of X miles, nobody can have any electricity, Wi-Fi, solar panels, mobile phones, nothing.
Really?
And so it's an electro-smog-free zone
Yeah.
specifically arranged so these telescopes can operate and get maximum accuracy without any interference from the planet. So not only does light interfere with telescopes using optical things, but all our Wi-Fi and EMR affects the telescopes looking out in the other spectrums. And so these electro-sensitive people, literally, there's hundreds of them living in this small town near this telescope, purely because that's the only place they can live without without feeling the effects. So it's a growing number of people, and again, we don't know whether one day X percentage of the population is going to start waking up because of a cumulative effect of what this is doing to us.
Yeah.
So it's consumer beware out there, but got to the point where you ain't going to have much choice. You're going to be bathed in this night or day.
Yeah, yeah. That says it all, doesn't it? Just to wrap up on that, a little note of synchronicity here. I was just having a look at a play on Broadway at the present stage, which is the latest version of Orwell's 1984, and apparently it is so dynamic and so intrusive. People are being sick, they're leaving the theatre because it has recreated the original book. So how about that for a piece of synchronicity?
Wow.
That it's on right now as we are hearing about 5G. And there's another story in Nexus.
I hate to generalise, but it just sounds like all the Guardian and lefty readers, the Democrats, who are looking at it, because the other side of the fence, the Republicans and the Trump supporters, have been saying it for years.
Yeah, exactly. All right, look, we might take a quick break here, Duncan, and come back and have a chat about, you want to do another health story or whatever? We'll have a chat in a moment. Or the economy, the 21st century Greater Depression. Oh, are we depressed enough? Let's take a break. Back shortly. You're listening to Radio Out There. Duncan Rhodes with us this week.
I still can hear the master say, sing a tune 2 or 4, walking up and walking down and walking round the floor. And that was in the good old days when poetry rhymed, and we couldn't wait till 3 o'clock and the freedom bells to chime. In the age of uncertainty, freedom doesn't feel so free. Feeling doesn't feel the same when I think of you and me again. And someone surely somewhere somehow can recall the time we didn't have to lock our doors to strangers in the night time, for we were neighbors' children and dancers danced in time, and we couldn't wait till 12 o'clock for our parents to say goodnight. In the age of uncertainty, freedom doesn't feel so free. Feeling doesn't feel the same when I think of you and me again. There was comfort in the garden in the apple blossom time. The golden book was black and white and it kept us all in line. But when the walls come tumbling down like castles made of sand, it's time that we were going back to where it all began. In the age of uncertainty, freedom doesn't feel so free. Feeling doesn't feel the same when I think of you and me again. In the age of uncertainty, freedom doesn't feel so free. Feeling doesn't feel the same when I think of you and me again.
Ah, yes, the age of uncertainty. And we certainly are living in an age of uncertainty. Nobody seems to know what's going on in many, many instances. But I do know we're going back now to speak to Duncan Rhodes about some of the other great stories in the current edition of Nexus. Duncan, I remember the last time I spoke to Karen Mutton, who's written some wonderful stories on finance in the Nexus and also given a couple of good talks at the conferences. We talked about derivatives, and she always maintained that derivatives are basically just like going to Las Vegas and putting your money on red or black in the roulette wheel. There's a
in the context of modern day economy since 2000, yeah, that's an accurate description. Derivatives have actually been used throughout history. They're not a modern phenomenon, which is a product of the modern stock market. The oldest examples of derivatives are supposed to be based on contracts of olives in the ancient Greek days, and certainly in the 14th, 15th century, or was it the 17th? Whenever the Great Tulip thing in Amsterdam happened, they had a flourishing derivatives market.
Right.
In Amsterdam. I mean, it's not a new thing. Derivatives are a contract. So a derivative is a contract that gets its value from the performance of something else. Something else is called an underlying entity, or often just called underlying. So an underlying entity can be an asset, or it can be something like an interest rate, and that's really where derivatives are of interest to people like Karen Mutton and myself. So imagine you got the big four banks. So let's just say in Australia, you say you got the big bank, the which bank? The Commonwealth Bank. So this is an example. So the Commonwealth Bank, at any one time, has got all this money coming in from home mortgage owners who are paying their monthly mortgage, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So take, from the Commonwealth Bank point of view, at one point in time, they'll be sitting there and going, oh, g'day, Bruce, let's have a look at how we're going on the performance. I see we've got $2 billion a month coming in from Australians who are paying off their mortgage. So that $2 billion a month, obviously it's going to be up if the interest rates are up, and if the economy goes differently, that could be a bit less than $2 billion a month because of the interest rates going down. But generally speaking, in this example, there's a $2 billion a month revenue stream coming from people paying mortgages based on interest rates. So the Commonwealth Bank or another entity, they're able to package up that income stream, and it becomes an instrument, one of the three categories of financial instruments out there. The other categories of financial instruments being stocks, which are like equities or shares, and then you've got debt, which is like bonds and mortgages. And so the third one is derivatives. And so it's basically, it's as if someone like the bank or whatever took this and made a contract with another party, and so what you've got is it's really hard to explain, but you can then make more than one contract, or you can do deals, etc., and so it means you've got this whole third economy going, which is based on the performance of things at the bottom. So, but at the top, where you've got this economy going based on the performance of the things at the bottom, it is literally, it's like an upside-down funnel. The funnel's very pointed at the bottom, where you've got the consumers just paying their weekly mortgage, but the effects at the top of the funnel are very, very wide. It's estimated by some people that the amount of derivatives out there that need to be reined in are like well over the trillions, and some people have put it into quadrillions. There's not that much money on the planet. So, I mean, you're talking about an economy which is existing and it's moving and people are buying and trading and selling, but it's like a phantom economy, but somehow along the line it has become unregulated, unmonitored, and it's become a feeding ground for the guys at the top of the pile. Now, the guys at the top of the pile have got no interest in regulating themselves or even reporting if they're in a bad situation, unless there's a manipulated financial crash like back in 2001 and Enron and other people are tossed, Bears and Stern are all tossed around and tossed to the wolves, and some people do jail time and then make nice Hollywood movies, which makes it all biteable and affordable. But the bottom line is you've got this massive economy out there, which is, I mean, how do you explain it? I mean, it depends which economist you talk to as to what they believe is going to happen. Some people describe it, how economists, when you watch that 6 o'clock news in the evening and you've got the person talking about the stock market, every day they come up with some different analogy, like it's like crops growing, or it's like the weather, or, turbulent times, in this particular case, I've heard people describe sorting out derivatives bubble as like landing an out-of-control helicopter. I mean, they just come up with the most absurd terms. No one really knows what to do and how to sort it out, but it's putting everybody in this financial... I mean, the average person on the street, they don't even know what a derivative is.
No, of course.
If it pops and explodes, all they're going to realise one day is they go to the bank account and there's no money left anywhere on the planet. But where does it go? This is the thing. I mean, we are living in la-la land when it comes to the economy since about the year 2000. And you throw in high-frequency trading where they can do thousands of trades a second. Thousands of different trades a second.
Incredible.
Instead of, how... I mean, the maximum speed used to be as fast as you could yell them out across the floor and people would make a decision and write them down. Computers are doing them. Artificial intelligence is in on the game, making decisions instead of humans. That's a whole nother area which needs to be rectified and explored. I mean, we're on a runaway train and we don't know who's looking after it, where the tracks are going or whatever, but it's a really scary situation. The article here is giving you a good overview of what it all is, what it means. It names a few people. Goldman Sachs investment bank at the centre of a lot of this perpetuation of the fraud. And then you look at who has worked for Goldman Sachs, who's now in key positions of power in the Western world. There's hardly a prime minister, a president, or a economic advisor, or a minister of state that hasn't sometimes worked for Goldman Sachs.
Really?
It's not just a revolving door. It's almost as if they send out these missionaries to go out and perpetuate this fraud. It's now a fraud so big that it will never be reined in, just like vaccinations. It's out of control. The guy who wrote it's really interesting. He was in the army for quite a few years, and but he's got a lot of credit in the insurance industry, so he knows his stuff.
Yeah. The article I find fascinating because they're talking about a 21st century Greater Depression, and basically saying that we are there's ample evidence that the world is now in a depression. Greece, Spain, Italy reporting persistent double-digit unemployment rates, so on. And basically, I love the definition that a depression actually starts off as a financial panic. Yes,
it's emotionally based, absolutely. I mean, depression and recession have got, in most places, a definition which is arrived at, but it starts with an emotional panic that you've got to have like a flock of sheep spooked, and that mass effect of the sheep will cause other bits and pieces. Of course, you can start the panic yourself if you're well entrenched in the stock market. Have a few friends in the media. You can start a rumour and a leak, and that goes on all the time.
Yeah, of course.
Actually, the more fine aspects of that became called insider trading. But it's not much different. So the interesting situation about this is that most conspiracy writers and researchers have always alluded to this sort of scenario leading up to a Orwellian dictatorship of everybody on the planet by a whole bunch of experts at the top who are unfeeling, uncaring, etc., along with surveillance, suppression of dissent, etc. And the idea generally has been that the finance and the stock market is used to usher in this type of massive dictatorship. But you can see at the moment that if the economy were to crash internationally and nobody had money to buy, the people at the so-called top are just as bad off as the rest of us in terms of, they need us to go out and buy stuff. They need us to pay our taxes. They need us to pay our mortgages.
Exactly.
They need us to buy petrol.
Yeah.
They need us to do it. And it's starting to present a really interesting scenario. And I want to segue into another bit here. Do you need a break before we go into talking about...
No. Let's segue into that because we talked about artificial intelligence before.
Yes. Well, this is... I'll just find the exact thing here. I've got a chunk in here, and I mentioned it in the editorial. I talked about the future and how artificial intelligence and robotics are replacing many jobs in the workforce that not many people would expect.
I know it's frightening, isn't it? I mean, people like accountants and lawyers and people like that.
Well, accountants and when you think about it, accounting and legal would be the first ones you would expect to go to artificial intelligence because you've got fixed things like laws and rules.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is the case where you can make decisions based on if this. You don't need a human to do it for you. In fact, AI is probably going to do a much more accurate job all the way through. It's things like bricklaying.
Yeah.
It's things like picking fruit.
Exactly.
It's the fact that my local council, which isn't even an advanced, you know, council, is already planning which lanes and which roads are going to be allocated to driverless cars. I mean, it's, you know, when your local council's got meetings and committee meetings and discussing it, and the infrastructure that's being planned for our state of Queensland is incorporating driverless cars, you realise that this is a lot closer than you think. We've got local, small-scale, we're not talking huge factory farms, we're talking medium-sized fruit farms in the Sunshine Coast hinterland, which often rely on backpackers. Well, I'm afraid backpackers are going to be hard-pressed to find work in the future because they've got robot fruit-picking machines, which are scalable to quite a variety of different fruits and heights. These machines are expected to have paid for themselves by 2020.
And they work 24 hours a day?
24/7. No unions, no food, don't need accommodation. It's just unbelievable. And, I mean, this is coming along quicker than most. I mean, bricklaying machines, again, they work 24/7. I mean, you know, they do an absolute pristine job. It's quicker than most people think. So,
Duncan, I've got to mention something here because I went over in the about 83, 84. I was writing a video column for a major newspaper here, and we were taken over to Japan, a whole group of us, and shown through the factories by a company called Matsushita, which produces Panasonic and various other things. And we were looking at televisions and everything like that. We were looking at stuff that didn't come out for at least another 10 to 15 years, they were showing us at the time. But as we went into these huge production places, there were vast rooms and there were one or two people in there. It was robotics back in the early 80s. And the writing was on the wall then. And there were these sterile rooms with these guys or girls, you didn't know what they were because they had the like hazmat suits on. Yeah. And it was obvious then that it was going to happen. Why have we taken so long to wake up to the fact that AI is not something that has just suddenly jumped on us? It's been around for a long time and it's been on the way.
Most journalists don't know that AI writes 75% of the global sport, weather and economics news stories. Over 75% of those stories put on the feed are written by AI and have been for 5 years. And I only discovered this 2 years ago when Media Watch did a story on it on ABC TV in Australia, and they were shocked that it had been going on several years before then. And what shocked them even more is when they got samples of AI-generated news, weather, economics and sports stories, and they got human-generated ones, none of their staff or writers could tell them apart.
Tell the difference, yep.
And so, that's even in the field of journalism, where journalists are supposed to be up to date on everything, but are patently not. AI is already starting to replace them. And you remember on TV shows and documentaries during the 80s and 90s, it was not uncommon to have a bit of, the upcoming Prime Minister vying for election would walk through some factory and you'd see all these robotic machinery doing their things with a few humans walking around. So it's not as if we haven't been expecting it. But I mean, the car manufacturing industry in Australia, a lot of those workers were replaced by robots over a period of time. And the robots existed 20 years before they were applied at the end. It was just scaling down an industry to not cause such an economic catastrophe. You've got to really manage the mass unemployment.
So where are we now, you've got to ask?
Well, this is where we're coming back to this weird thing called universal basic income. If you follow this through to its natural conclusion, the companies at the top are always looking to make more and more profits, and they're trying to lay off more and more people and automate everything. So where's the money going to come from that people have to keep the system going? It's one thing to lay people off, but like America has found, you can only lay off so many people before the economy starts coming to a grinding halt, because no one's got any money to go and buy milk or buy food at the restaurant anymore. So
or pay tax.
Instead of once a week at the restaurant, they pull back, and and enough people doing that restaurant's income goes. Right now across America, there is a bricks and mortar retail meltdown. Macy's are closing hundreds of stores across the country. It's been kept out of the mainstream newspapers around the world because they don't want to cause panic in the stock market. But shopping malls and shops, you have a look at, if you can walk down Madison Avenue and see how many shuttered stores there are there, and the stores that are there, all of them are losing money, but they maintain the loss of money because it's worth the prestige to have their brand on Madison Avenue, but they're losing money.
They're losing money? Oh.
It's a meltdown. So where is the average consumer going to get money from in order to buy stuff to keep the system going, to buy stuff that the robots need to make? It all comes back to that. So there is discussion, believe it or not, about giving everybody on the planet a form of universal basic income. Just give them money.
Give them money. So that means money is worth nothing.
It's not going to be structured necessarily like the dole or unemployment benefits. They will basically just give everybody money to make sure they can go out and keep buying stuff. How much money they're going to get, how it's going to be structured, is it taxable, all these questions. They're discussing, should we tax robots? Since robots are replacing the humans, maybe we should tax robots, which means the companies using robots fork out money for what they've lost.
Well, it's no wonder the gold standard was dropped.
But it's interesting to see who's behind the universal basic income and where it's being tested. Elon Musk and quite a few other people are really pushing for a greater awareness of it. It's being trialled in parts of Canada, India, other places lining up. On our wonderful nexusnewsfeed.com, we have a whole topic dedicated to basic income where we put up news items that pop up from every place that's testing them and what they're finding out.
What they're finding out.
We're facing an uncertain and unknown future, and whether it's going to be one of slavery or freedom or somewhere in between, whether we are enslaved but we think we're free, which is probably half the Western world at the moment, I don't know, but it's
a scary prospect.
It's going to make for a few more radio shows, Barry.
Yeah, that's for sure. Duncan, let's take a quick break and come back for the final segment. Maybe we could talk about Erich von Däniken, a favourite of yours, and many, many Nexus listeners, of course, and readers. You're listening to Radio Out There. Back with Duncan Rhodes in just a couple of minutes. That's from Asher's CD called Resurrection, a song called Pixie. Asher's well known for writing inspirational music, and I think with some of the things we're talking about, and the way the world's going, we all need as much inspiration as we can get. Now back to Duncan. Okay, Duncan, Erich von Däniken, he's been around for a long time now, well in his 80s, still churning out books, still giving talks, doing all sorts of things. An interview in the latest edition of Nexus.
Absolutely. Great guy. He did a sellout, not performance, he did a sellout presentation in London late last year and received honours and accolades from adoring fans from around the world. Very controversial character. I don't think there's probably a person listening to the show who doesn't know who he is. We had the pleasure of meeting him in Australia last year or the year before when he came out and did some talks at Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and at the Nexus conference. And really interesting guy on a personal level. Not everyone's cup of tea. He can be a bit grumpy and stuff, but he's in his 80s and he's powering on. And I've found that, I don't know whether I mentioned this on radio before, but I noticed for a person who likes his cigarette and a glass of red wine after dinner every evening that he looks incredibly young. His skin, for a person of his age, especially male, looks incredibly smooth and young. And I said to him, are you on any special cream or any special diet to look so young? And he laughed and said no, and his diet's nothing super special. I mean, he's not a crazy sugar eater or anything like that. But he did say one very interesting thing. He said that he talks to and thanks the cells of his body every night before he goes to sleep. And he gives thanks to the Creator God for an amazing life and an amazing planet. Very humble man spiritually, very grateful man spiritually.
Yeah.
And he feels that he can never tell anybody that he talks to his cells because he's worried that people might think he's crazy. And when he told me that, I said to him, people already think you're crazy for believing that the gods were aliens. So, and he didn't care about that. He just went out there and changed the world. But he's a little bit embarrassed about confessing that he talks to the cells of his body. And so I shared with him at dinner that there's umpteen scientific experiments which show that cells, human cells, plant cells, are very responsive to intent, thought, feelings and stuff from humans and can be demonstrated as such. And yes, so there you go. There's an interesting side indeed to Eric von Daniken.
Yeah, it is. And I like this article because it's, for those of us who read Chariots of the Gods so many years ago, to read this again, hear some of the stuff which has been not regurgitated but rewritten, and a couple of updates. I found this a very interesting article.
Not a lot of people know that after Eric wrote his first couple of books, and he made some money out of that, but he ploughed all the money back into further research, doing field trips. He organised so many expeditions which not many people are aware of. Paying for helicopters and army troops to escort them into different places. He worked very closely with authorities. There was one time when he was caught in an entrapment thing, which is one of the things the skeptics all wave around as evidence that he's a fraud, but he's not. And a very, very interesting life indeed, but a man totally dedicated to his subject. And you can pretty much see from this article, watching Ancient Aliens and interviews with him that you see on TV, that he hasn't changed his overall opinion that the beings we call the gods must have been what we'd call extraterrestrials, and the technology which would have been seen as such. And I still feel, though, that mankind needs to pick that thing up and run with it a bit further and examine in particular the role of the priests in our old cultures.
Yeah,
they're the ones that communicated with the gods, chose who could marry and have babies and who could marry who, and manage the economies.
Yep, it makes sense.
Always manage the economies, and the economies were always going out and digging up gold.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, just to wrap up, I know there were a couple of comments that you'd like to make about some of the global news stories. Really good global news stories that are starting to appear more and more often now in Nexus.
Yes, well, we've got our Nexus Newsfeed.com up and running, which is a totally free to everybody digital news service. So now, when I want to put my global news in, instead of going through the internet for hours and hours and hours, I just get Nexus Newsfeed up on the screen, and bang, 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 I get to pick from a huge amount of amazing stories. In this issue, we've got more evidence showing that gut bacteria is really much more dominant and should be given a lot more attention. So getting that ecosystem in your gut is one of the most important things you can do for your health. There's a book out at the moment called Medical Medium.
Yes.
It pretty much stresses the same thing, but from different angles, especially with the role of fruits and vegetables and the role in the gut. We've got a news item in this issue, which is about gut bacteria overriding and telling the brain what animals should eat. Now, this is something we've suspected for a while, but they're actually proving it now in animal experiments, which is unfortunate. animal experiments are proving that the gut bacteria override the brain. So you now probably need to think twice when you say the gut is the second brain, because when you look at some of the TV shows and all these overweight people who can't stop eating and doing things, they feel cravings, they'll do anything for cravings. It's almost suggesting that in some cases the gut is more of a powerful brain than the brain in the skull. And there's lots of other interesting bits and pieces on that. Got an item in here showing plants listen to find sources of water, so I'm trying to find stories which push the boundaries of our understanding of the other life forms that we share this planet with. Plants are a life form that have been on this planet for longer than most, and it seems like they are a lot more intelligent, aware, communicative, and resourceful than we had ever dreamed. We've got an article I'm working on right now for the next issue, all about trees and how they communicate. And again, one of the good things about science is that we can use new discoveries and understandings to expand our appreciation of things like that plants are alive and intelligent and communicate. Other stories, again, pushing the boundaries of technology. Shape-shifting molecular robots respond to DNA signals. This is down at the biomolecular level. You've got self-assembling robots, self-assembling molecules, all sorts of stuff. And it's just a Pandora's box when it comes to nanotechnology. They've got food additives now. Instead of putting a chemical in for food additives, they're now talking about putting nanobots in the food because they're about the same size as a chemical.
Oh my God.
So nanobots will be giving flavours in the future if this comes out. And will we be told in the labelling? This is another issue we'll have to address in Nexus in the future.
Don't hold your breath.
I mean, it just goes on and on. DNA hair analysis reveals Australian Aborigines have been here for 50,000 years. Finally, the government or somebody has released funding to archaeologists who for decades and decades and decades, archaeologists would apply for funding to do research into Australia's history. No. Oh, you can go to Egypt and dig there. You can go to the so-and-so and dig there, but no, not Australia.
No.
The last few years, it's like the lid came off, and we've had this avalanche of stuff pushing back the dating and placement of the indigenous culture.
Stephen and Evan Strong have done some great work on that.
Yeah, and it's something Nexus is going to be pushing in the future. The conference next year is going to be called The Secret History of Australia, and it's all about what you weren't told about what really happened on this continent.
All right. Well, I think on that note, it's a good time to wrap up our program because you can leave that little bit of bait out there for next year's conference, Duncan.
Okay.
All righty. Great to talk to you.
Thanks, Barry.
And we'll catch up soon. And it's always a pleasure, a delight to talk with Duncan Rhodes on the program. Thanks for your company and look forward to joining me next week, I hope, because I'll be here. See you then.